When my daughter announced her engagement, I decided to hide my $80 million inheritance to see who would treat me with genuine kindness versus those after my wealth. I'm Margaret Thompson. At 71, I've seen how money can change relationships in beautiful and devastating ways. Nothing prepared me for the revelations that followed my beloved husband James's passing last spring. We shared 46 wonderful years. He was my anchor, my champion, my best friend. We met at a charity dance in Portland in the early 80s. I knew he would change my life forever. We lived modestly. James worked as the head librarian at the downtown public library, and I managed the children's section at our neighborhood branch. Our cozy craftsman home in Southeast Portland became our sanctuary. We raised our daughter Sarah there, always having everything we truly valued. As James's health worsened and specialists explained his advanced kidney disease, I thought I was emotionally prepared. Nobody is ever truly ready for such a loss. During those final months, we talked about our cherished memories, disappointments, and our hopes for Sarah's future. However, I kept one crucial secret from him. Shortly after we married, I inherited money from my grandmother in Seattle. She had quietly invested it over the years. I kept this to myself. Those investments grew steadily to a staggering sum $80 million. When my daughter announced her engagement, I decided to hide my $80 million inheritance to see who would treat me with genuine kindness versus those after my wealth. I'm Margaret Thompson. At 71, I've seen how money can change relationships in beautiful and devastating ways. Nothing prepared me for the revelations that followed my beloved husband James's passing last spring. We shared 46 wonderful years. He was my anchor, my champion, my best friend. We met at a charity dance in Portland in the early 80s. I knew he would change my life forever. We lived modestly. James worked as the head librarian at the downtown public library, and I managed the children's section at our neighborhood branch. Our cozy craftsman home in Southeast Portland became our sanctuary. We raised our daughter Sarah there, always having everything we truly valued. As James's health worsened and specialists explained his advanced kidney disease, I thought I was emotionally prepared. Nobody is ever truly ready for such a loss. During those final months, we talked about our cherished memories, disappointments, and our hopes for Sarah's future. However, I kept one crucial secret from him. Shortly after we married, I inherited money from my grandmother in Seattle. She had quietly invested it over the years. I kept this to myself. Those investments grew steadily to a staggering sum, $80 million. Why stay silent? James took great pride in supporting our family through his dedicated work. Learning about this wealth would have taken away his sense of purpose and achievement. I wanted him to live genuinely without this burden, building a life rich in ways money cannot create. 3 weeks after the memorial service, I finally visited the credit union to access the secure vault with all the documentation. Inside were heavy folders full of trust agreements, property titles, and portfolio statements. All under my maiden name, Margaret Ann Foster. The final amount was in my precise handwriting on a summary document, $80 million and some change. I remember sitting in that cramped private office, staring at those numbers as if they might vanish with too much blinking. The banker checked on me repeatedly during my visit. That moment sparked a decision. I wouldn't tell Sarah right away. She had recently finished her residency in emergency medicine in Denver and was building her career as a trauma physician. She showed independence and was carving her own path. I refused to let this fortune influence her choices or attract people who saw her as a way to luxury. Still, curiosity consumed me. Would people in her social circle treat me with respect as an elderly widow from Southeast Portland? Or would they disregard me, assuming I couldn't meet their high expectations? 4 months later, Sarah came home, her eyes radiating excitement. "Mom, I need to share something important," she announced. practically bouncing on our family room sectional like a teenager again. I found someone special. His name is Alexander Morrison, and I know he's my soulmate. We're getting married. She eagerly described Alexander, explaining how he was finishing his law degree at Stanford, how his family was prominent, and how his father owned Morrison and Associates Legal Group. The firm name meant nothing to me, but her voice was full of admiration. Do you really love him? I asked with everything inside me. She said without hesitation. I agreed to meet him that weekend. I wanted to assess the man who had captured my daughter's heart and see the world she was entering. Alexander Morrison arrived that Saturday with a sophisticated confidence seen in those who never worry about their next meal. Exceptionally tall, perfectly groomed, and wearing a watch likely worth more than my mortgage. He offered a firm handshake and a charming smile. At first, his manners seemed fine. He praised my rose garden, said my homemade lasagna was the best he had ever tasted, and asked about my library career. But beneath his smooth conversation lay something cold. I noticed how his eyes scanned my warm living space, taking in the well-worn furniture and family photos, lingering as if he were noting the absence of obvious wealth. Mrs. Thompson, Sarah, has shared great stories about you, he said over the pot roast and mashed potatoes I had made. Your library work must have been rewarding. It must be fulfilling to dedicate yourself to public service all those years. His tone was polite, but his emphasis on public service made my chest tighten with discomfort. Sarah either missed these signals or chose to ignore them. She glowed with happiness, and I didn't want to ruin her evening with my growing concerns. As they left, I accidentally overheard part of their conversation on the porch. Alex, are you sure about having this ceremony here in Portland? Sarah asked. Of course, he replied. It's just that my parents expect certain venue standards. We could have an intimate ceremony here for your relatives, followed by a bigger celebration at the country club for our entire guest list. That way, we find a good balance. Balance. I understood what he meant, keeping me and my connections hidden to avoid discomfort. In the following weeks, I met the Morrison family. His father, William Morrison, was the type of man who ensured everyone knew his importance within minutes of meeting him. His mother, Catherine, had a polished quality often mistaken for genuine grace. Every hair in place, every word dripping with sweetness, yet somehow leaving you feeling diminished after each encounter. Their sprawling estate outside Sacramento had marble entries, countless hallways, and staff moving like shadows. Margaret Sarah is such a bright young woman, Catherine remarked during our first meeting, her smile delicate yet controlled. It's delightful to see her integrate so well into our social circle. Integrate, another word that sounded nice while cutting deeply upon reflection. As wedding preparations continued, subtle comments from Alexander's parents became harder too. Ignore Catherine had a talent for packaging insults so elegantly you nearly thanked her afterward. During menu planning, she smiled and said, "We've chosen to keep expenses reasonable, dear." Not everyone appreciates the more exclusive options. Her eyes briefly met mine before returning to Sarah. William preferred being straightforward. While touring their chosen venue, he chuckled. "Don't worry about membership requirements, Margaret. You're coming as our invited guest. Guest like I was visiting a place forever beyond my reach." The invitation list became my breaking point. We gathered in the Morrisons' grand dining hall, a space large enough to fit my entire house. Catherine sat at the head of the table with an expensive planner open in front of her, Alexander beside her, while Sarah appeared slightly uncomfortable. "Margaret," Catherine began without looking up, "we'll need names of your relatives and friends for invitations. Our venue accommodates about 400 guests." I hesitated. "I only need a few spots. Most family members have passed, and I'd like to include maybe 30 close friends." Her smile froze. "Of course, smaller families create intimacy." William leaned in. "We should also discuss seating arrangements. Some guests include senators, corporate executives, and appellate judges. We need to ensure everyone feels comfortable." I understood that translation perfectly. My neighborhood friends and retired librarian colleagues wouldn't sit anywhere near their distinguished guests. Sarah stayed silent, just glancing at Alexander and nodding slightly, seemingly agreeing with their view. The final insult occurred during the rehearsal dinner seating discussions. Catherine consulted her diagram and said, "Margaret, we'll place you at table 18 toward the back with some of our more casual attendees. I think you'll feel more comfortable there. More comfortable." I smiled and agreed because I fully understood her intention. They wanted me invisible from the front, where I might show up in photographs meant for society publications. That evening, alone in my kitchen, I reviewed bank statements for accounts my grandmother had set up. $80 million, enough to buy their club outright, fund this wedding many times over, or enjoy more luxury than the Morrisons could imagine. Yet, they assumed they could measure my worth based on wealth they thought I lacked. The wedding day surpassed Catherine's every promise. Beautiful, expensive, and brimming with extravagance to impress their crowd. The country club ballroom had towering white rose arrangements, crystal chandeliers lighting up hundreds of guests, and a chamber ensemble playing softly nearby. I wore my best charcoal dress suit bought for James's funeral and sat at table 18. Far from the head table, surrounded by unfamiliar Morrison relatives. A university friend of Alexander's scrolling through social media and two other, equally confused guests. From my rear position, I watched Sarah walk down the aisle, glowing in her gown. I thought of James, how he would have cried seeing his little girl. My heart swelled with pride, but underneath that was sharp pain from being intentionally placed in obscurity. The ceremony went flawlessly, the reception a polished display of wealth and influence. Catherine delivered her mother-of-a-groom speech like a pro. She talked about merging different backgrounds, how Alexander would lead Sarah into a better life, and how her family would eventually embrace the customs we hold dear. Every word sounded kind, yet felt like a physical blow. Her family, better life, embracing our customs. The unspoken message was clear. We weren't good enough as we were. I looked at Sarah, hoping for a sign of discomfort, but she smiled and nodded, her hand resting in Alexander's, as if agreeing with every word. In that moment, something inside me shifted. Not anger exactly, but a colder certainty that I wouldn't leave without making my position clear. When Catherine finished her toast and polite applause began, I stood up. The movement started subtly, but the effect spread quickly. Conversations halted, heads turned. By the time I reached the front, the chamber ensemble had quieted, and every eye in that glittering ballroom was on me. "Catherine," I said, smiling just enough to stay polite. "Thank you for your kind words about elevated lifestyles. I'd like to share something with you and everyone here about my own lifestyle." The room fell silent. Catherine's practiced smile faltered, and William leaned back with a tired expression. "You see," I began, my voice steady, yet carrying a cross. "The ballroom, I've been keeping a small secret for a long time. My late husband never knew, and I certainly didn't tell my daughter until now. But after hearing so much about elevation and lifestyles tonight, I think it's time to share." Reached into my purse and pulled out a single page of bank statement I had printed that morning. Years ago, I inherited money from my grandmother in Seattle. I invested it carefully, let it grow, and never spent a penny. As of today, that inheritance is worth $80 million. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Catherine's eyes darted to Alexander, whose color had drained. Sarah sat frozen, lips parted, staring at me as if she were seeing her mother for the first time. "I could have bought this club," I continued steadily. "I could have funded this wedding 20 times over without worry. But I chose silence because I wanted to see who would treat me respectfully without knowing anything about my financial situation." I glanced around the crowd. Most of you, I regret to say, acted just as I expected, as if my worth depended on your judgment of my wealth. You placed me in the back, spoke condescendingly, and showed me I wasn't your kind of person. William shifted uncomfortably. Margaret, I know, William, I interrupted. You didn't know. And that's exactly the point. You didn't know. So you felt safe treating me as inferior. My life has been fulfilling. I worked proudly as a librarian. I raised a daughter I'm proud of. I shared over 4 decades of love with a man who valued me for my character, not my money. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Mom, she whispered. I turned to her, sweetheart. I love you more than I can say. But I didn't raise you to let anyone, even a husband's family, make you ashamed of your roots. Respect isn't about bank balances. It's about integrity. I folded the paper, put it back in my purse, and smiled politely at Catherine. You don't need to worry about my family rising to your lifestyle. We've been living rich lives all along, just not by your standard. That, I turned and walked toward the exit. Halfway there, I heard soft footsteps rushing behind me. Ah, please wait. Sarah's voice cracked as she reached me outside the doors. She was crying openly, her makeup running. I am so sorry I didn't see it until tonight. I let their world blind me, and I forgot the values you and Dad taught me. I touched her cheek. Money changes people, Sarah. If simply being around their wealth could shake your foundation. Imagine what would have happened if you'd grown up knowing about mine. She nodded slowly. What should I do now? You go back inside, I said gently, and start showing them and yourself that you know exactly who you are. And if Alexander can't support you in that, then you'll learn something important before it's too late. Sarah hugged me tightly, like she hadn't since childhood thunderstorms scared her. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. I always will. I drove home through Portland's quiet streets, past the library where I worked for decades, past the church where James and I married in a simple ceremony that cost a few $100s but was filled with more joy than anything in that country club ballroom, settling into my favorite armchair, the same one where James and I used to talk late into the night. I knew one thing for sure. $80 million could never buy dignity, but it could help preserve it. The James and Margaret Thompson Foundation would do just that, providing full scholarships for children from working-class families to become doctors, teachers, engineers, and dreamers. Children with talent and determination who needed someone to believe in them. That would be my true legacy. Not the money, not the club membership, but the reminder that real wealth is measured by the lives you touch, not the circles you impress. Ultimately, the money stayed where it had always been, quietly working behind the scenes. While the real lesson stood clearly visible. Your worth will never be decided by your bank account size, but by the strength of your character. Sometimes the wealthiest thing you can do is walk away from a table where your value isn't recognized. If you believe respect should never be bought, join our growing community that values dignity over dollars. Share this story with someone who needs the reminder that true wealth isn't about the lifestyle you inherit, but the legacy you create. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in Margaret's position.